Yep, I can confirm I was wrong about Pixar's Hoppers, and this is great news, honestly. I don't intend to be some Pixar hater that hates every marketing trailer that comes out of the company. I want Pixar to succeed. I adore some of their absolute classics, and I always hold them to the highest tier of standards. It's the double-edged sword of being the best animation studio at one point. And when it comes to the trailer for Pixar's Hoppers of all things, I'm still gonna double down and say the marketing was terrible for this movie. I don't know why specifically I've got beef against the Pixar marketing team, but this isn't the first time they've horrendously represented their movie. In the past, they've done the likes of turning Elemental into a generic element-based romance movie, which is absolutely not the point of that movie. And with this one, it's a little less severe than that. It's just a matter of all of the worst jokes that are in this movie were condensed and put into the trailers. There are about 5 moments in Pixar's Hoppers that make me roll my eyes at the comedy. All of them were in the marketing too. Lines like, "This is just like Avatar," absolutely are still in the movie. "Wow, you're trying to take a little bit of the pie of one of the most profitable movies of all time? How humble, totally not shallow and doesn't feel like ulterior motives." And also, does that mean that exists in universe? Why? Like, you know, that kind of level of referential, basic, lowest common denominator cameos, I'm very not on board with. And the trailers like to start with that first. In reality, Pixar's Hoppers is a fantastical movie that does all of the cliches in a storyline as the best definitive version of those cliches. It's an interesting one, because the premise behind Hoppers, as I saw from the marketing campaign up to it, I wasn't fully on board with, you know? We've seen many a body swap story before, and a million times have we seen animals fighting against construction workers or an evil politician. Just this time it seems to be more coded in millennial Vine humor and emojis as if they weren't 10 years old by this point, if not 15, 20. And there are still elements within that, sure, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. We're keeping things generally spoiler-free early on, but when it comes to actually addressing that problem and showcasing it in a certain way, this is the best example I've ever seen of humans versus nature in some accord. It goes in interesting directions, slightly less cliched than the real cliche beats. When you have the idea of a human pretending to be an animal, there are probably some beats you expect later down the line, certain reveals. They subvert them in nice ways. And for me to turn around and say Hoppers is as bad as I thought would be a total misjudgment of this movie. It is actually pretty damn good, if not great. And that is such a great win to hear from Pixar, who have struggled for the longest of times. We've had the heights of Inside Out 2, fantastic, had to go off of an incredible premise and a sequel, but it worked. But then otherwise, everything since Coco has been just its own unfortunate train wreck or some ball and chain holding it down. Whether it's from the locked-out movies that had both technical and logistical issues, let alone the storyline, or the developmental hell that was Elio recently, this is the best movie we've seen since Coco. It's not as good as Coco, and we'll get to how good the quality actually is, but it is far from the disaster piece that this general era of Pixar has kind of felt like. Maybe that's some harsh words, but it's the best we've seen in years is what I'm trying to say. Especially for an original. And that alone comes with all sorts of hurdles. It's going to be really interesting to see how this movie does, because I have some predictions. From the very first frame of this movie, you could just tell that this was going to be, directorially, a fantastic showcase. Immediately when it comes to the actual action sequences and choreography, this movie has all sorts of brilliant explorations and quirks in droves. If anything, the more I watched this movie, the more angry I got about what the trailer omitted to show rather than what it did. One of my favorite scenes, ironically, is that early science lab scene, but not the here into here 7 times over. There's a sequence of the beaver just getting out and fighting against the scientists while trying to escape. And there's a great little sequence with a broom and like squeaking audio and like, you know, the fact it's a beaver goes flying up in the ceiling. Brilliant! I loved that. That's when I knew this movie had its soul, and it's such a shame, because that's nowhere near a spoiler that they could have missed from the trailer. A little bit of squeaking and a broom, and that's all they needed, man. Now that being said, if you can think of the general plot lines that would follow from this premise, They do run with that. It is a relatively simple movie. It's to the point I've actually got the least amount of reviewing notes for this movie than I think I have in a long time for a new movie. It's a relatively simple story. And even when it comes to like the intricate details I want to ramble and gush about that I usually do in these videos, somehow there aren't actually that much to gush about, unless I talk about micro expressions in certain tiny moments. Surprisingly, this is just a good, simple film. It is that cliche thing. The final message is a slight spin on the standard cliche thing. It's quite a simple family movie, and that's fine, I think, but it does run me with little to really say, and that's interesting. I think this movie in general is going to be intriguing to see how it does, because it is as well a Pixar original film, which historically don't do as well as their sequels, especially in this time financially. I'm going to be surprised if people come to see the cinema in droves. Unless word of mouth really gets out there, we'll see how powerful that is. The cinema screening I went to was a much smaller screen room than usual, as if to say they don't have hopes for large numbers. You know, there was a few families there. Less than when there was a bigger room. What I can really see happening, though, with this movie is once it comes out for free on Disney Plus for people, this could easily be a top hitter. Not exactly on the levels of Moana, I don't think, but a super solid new Pixar? That's pretty great stuff. Whether it's a classic, there's some debate to go there, I think, still. So, the premise is, based on the spoilers we know from the trailers, we have a wild child girl who doesn't really fit in, forcing her way into a body swap with a beaver in order to save a little bit of natural land against a bunch of construction workers and a political new highway going over the area, destroying the natural reserve of things. There are some quirky animal characters along the way. They're fun. I really like the protagonist. I really like the humans in this. I didn't fully get on board with the animals, and maybe that's a me thing. There's a lizard who does a lot of the lizard meme. I'm also personally not crazy on Loaf, but maybe that is a minority point. It's the other beaver. But then upon telling the animals that the humans are gunning for their land, they then go a little off on one and decide to squish the humans themselves. It is a war of animals versus humans, and this beaver human is in the very center of it. And that alone is a nice spin on the premise. The idea that the animals are the ones that go out of control and can become an antagonistic body themselves, I really, really like. Add on a little cameo to the birds from that one Pixar short in that one scene in the trailer, and you're good to go. There's actually a lot of Pixar references in this, specifically the other animals in Pixar movies. And that's as well has me, like, umming and ahhing a lot. There's a turtle that appears. He's named Crush, Finding Nemo reference. There's some other animal species banded together, and it feels like another movie reference. I think most of them are fantastic, subtle-ish versions of layered jokes with these cameos, and there's one right at the end that I like a little less. Do I like my Pixar movies referencing other Pixar movies to that degree? Not just like a ball in the background? I don't know. I think most of the time it was fine. There's a handful of eye rolls. Oh, also, one other reference that I think's an unfortunate accident is one of the characters looked exactly like one of the characters from Elio. And I was just thinking them the whole time. Technically, it's a better version of that character from Elio, but I was just like, oh, it's just them again. Oops, what a shame. Or what a reference? I don't know. Accidental, it's interesting. I'm getting distracted. Let's stick to the main premise, right? Across the board, this movie does a lot of the standard tropes you would expect to see, but it does them either really well and decently emotive enough, or it subverts them in interesting new ways that I think makes it an enjoyable experience no matter how many movies you've watched. I'd absolutely recommend it in that regard, but it also isn't bursting through the walls with all the creativity in the world. Or even with some of the ideas you think could come with more plot strength or emotional swings, they again choose to avoid a little bit in Pixar movies. I would argue this movie wasn't as emotive as it could have been, but it is more emotive than most of the recent Pixar movies. It's a weird thing. They're a lot less, this film's gonna make you cry like Pixar classics did, but there is a little bit of it. I wish there was more. Oh, also, a major point before we go into spoiler territory, I've got to mention, the visuals for this movie, absolutely stellar. I think they really brilliantly executed the vibe of the beauty of nature very naturally. There's a lot of moments where you're meant to slow down and just breathe in the air and see the visuals, and they really nicely worked well. All the while, the stylistic designs of the animal characters once they're talking, I think are decent enough on their own. I'm a very big fan of the directorial choice of giving them the whites in their eyes only when we can understand them, and they go right back to the small black eyes when we can't. They do some great shots that switch halfway through all throughout this movie. Those are brilliant. Love that stuff. Visually, quite a nice feast. As much as it does have that human bean head-shaped Pixar aesthetic still, that I would like them to move away from more. The animals looked nicer. They felt like they had their own style. The humans, they were fine, you know? But visually, still a feast. Generally, it's a good simplistic plot with a really decent execution, a breath of fresh air that it's good and from Pixar, and could very well get its own little cult classic following, but I don't think it's good enough to call a Pixar classic or a masterpiece. It is great. Really, really great. That seems to be the new ceiling from Pixar. It's how I read it, because I wonder how much this movie will really impact me when I have so little notes. The rest of them are spoiler territory, so this is going to be our splitting mark. I'm now going to start going into extra specifics, so if you're still waiting to see this movie, or you're going to wait for it to come off on Disney+, then be prepared, we're going to go into the details. Though even then, the spoilers aren't that crazy, mostly. I think the biggest thing to be spoiled about is the appearance of a certain character, and how they appear. Anyway, let's get into that now. Hey there, thank you for making it to the halfway mark of this video. Come subscribe if you haven't already for more animated movie reviews. When Toy Story 5 comes out later in the year, we'll cover that one, as well as Mario Galaxy, and whatever the hell else is coming out, Shrek 5 at some point. But for now, let's get back to the second half of Pixar's Hoppers. Okay, so let's talk about the real plot swings of this movie. There's a really interesting standard thing at the beginning of this movie, whereby we come to learn about our protagonist's relationship with their grandmother. She brings through the main message and ethos of this story, whereby you need to enjoy the natural world, sit down and listen. Isn't nature beautiful? And I think there's some really solid stuff with her that they play a little too softly. The opening of the movie I thought was actually going to be an up sequence where we see our protagonist grow up with this old lady and then she passes away, and you feel that right at the start of the movie, and timeline-wise, that does happen. But we completely skip over her death. There are brief moments of reconvening back at this natural spot and listening and watching nature, which is nice. I don't think they worked as well as I wanted them to. They poked at heartstrings, but they weren't playing the whole heartstrings. I feel like there was even meant to be a message in there that the whole reason that Mabel is lashing out is because she's still grieving over her grandma in some form. There are some words and lines later on talking about parents or losing one's mother in some regard that felt like it should have connected back to like a core premise of grief for our character, and it doesn't. They don't do it well enough. There's nice bits. There's really nice, soft, heartwarming bits. I want to be stabbed through the heart and twisted, man. And I felt like there was potential there. The fact they're holding it back, a slight shame. Maybe it's personal preference. Now, I'm thinking about this mentally of like going through the events of the movie to find the spoiler stuff I want to talk about. The first half of the movie, I've not got anything major to point out, you know? Other than the lines that we saw again from the trailer really make me roll my eyes. Every animal's first line, I don't like in this movie. The deers doing a Vine reference of they were roommates. The birds tweeting at themselves saying, hi, I'm talking, am I talking? I'm talking to you, hey girl, you know, And even the words of the bear at the very start, grabbing the other beaver and be like, I got food, yay! There are a good handful of times I sorely roll my eyes at this. I feel like the humor is weird. I like a lot of it. A lot of the jokes really got a kick out of me. Simple stuff, like the protagonist as a little kid cleaning up next to the road as someone else throws junk and she just like angrily tries to throw it back at them. That's great. There are so many times in this movie where they do just like a bit too millennial humor, a bit too... They have an extended sequence of scream shouting noises that just goes on, and they don't even get to the conclusion of if the noise was accurate, as well as a sequence of, wow, look, emojis. I'm going to press more emojis. Wow, it's so funny that it's a different emoji. And then, In a lot of ways, this movie feels like it's 10 years old and just got released out of the vault a little late. Why was it almost every one of those jokes made it into the marketing? I have no idea. But that's probably the major thing I can remember spoiler-wise, specific lines from the first half of the movie worth mentioning. I think as well, as this movie ages, those kind of jokes are gonna age further. The lizard meme is in the center of this movie, and they just kept running with it, and it's already outdated, I think, when the trailers started coming out. But then once we get into the major conflict, not of the fact that the politician guy has been adding in noise disruptors in local lands to leave the animals outside to then take over their land, but in the animals actually turning around to fight against the humans, I'll admit I was a little bit, deceived in the marketing. When they say, "we will squish the humans," I kind of thought they meant plural. For the most part, especially in this scene specifically, they're just talking about one guy. They're talking about the politician guy. So the stakes slightly smaller in that case. But that scene then goes on to do a brilliant subversion that I fully wasn't expecting of Mabel accidentally killing the insect queen herself. In a sudden moment, just out of sheer, surprise, trying to get her out of the face. And, the wiping on the walls. Brilliant stuff. And the stakes of the entire animal kingdom coming out to try and tackle you is a really fun, scary drama that they play around with very nicely. It's here you then get the scene of the beavers talking to the guy via the phone in his car. A lot of people really like that clip. I think it's decent. I'm not as on board as the average person for some reason. Probably because of the lol, Jerry, heart emoji kind of lines. But it's from here that things really pick up and they have a lot of fun, because this is kooky, crazy animals direction. We see a little bit of it when the council appears with all their different species doing things, but they then go on to do an absolutely brilliant cartoony thing of the fish queen ordering her best soldier to squish this human by having seagulls chasing the car alongside the coast, diving into the ocean, and then pulling out their own gigantic shark to drop on the human and bite him too. It is fantastic. Pretty sure it's also a Finding Nemo reference because it happens to be the shark and the seagulls. And they do a million great things in this one action scene alone. Her name's Diane. She keeps speaking. There's a scene of her eyes being all white because she talks, and then she's like, "All right, have fun." And then the eyes fade away and it goes away. Brilliant. It's from here then at the end of this action sequence that things really pick up, as it all falls apart as you would expect it to do, right? You expect it to be that the beavers discover that Mabel is actually a human, and they have the whole, "how can I trust you anymore? I don't even know who you are." And they completely avoid that entirely. Because rather than discovering that their animal friend is actually a human, they first discover that one of their animals is in fact a robot, playing back with the Hopper's idea that they are avatars, not those ones, they are robotic avatars, and the animals in that moment don't get to communicate with the human they're talking to. It's one of the other scientists, they were there to help, they fell in the fall, don't worry about it. Also though, love the humor that those animals keep exploding, because they can, and the robots love that. Wow, brilliant. It's a really nice spin that the animals think that there are robots out there to get them. And then even further, when they do get to a capture moment and everything starts to make a discovery, rather than Mabel having to communicate with the Beaver King that she's a human, she's already been taken out of the Beaver avatar and her communicator is gone. So the scene of the Beaver King's realization of her betrayal is told entirely without human communication. He's got the tiny eyes and squeaks and animations, and that's all you need to explore this saddened betrayal, which is a far more fantastic cinematic version of that cliche than the classic dialogue that's not really needed to fit. It never works every time I've seen it in any other terrible movie. I love and adore that. And then they take it one step further, whereby all the animals in their full communicative barrage, I mean the whole floor disappears into a layer of snakes, horrifying, is they then take the premise of Hoppers and they reverse it. Our villain ends up being the new insect king who inserts himself into the Hoppers machine in reverse in order to commandeer the body of a robot shaped like a human. Had to force a bunch of scientists to do it. A little bit of magic and hullabaloo to make it work, but it's fun, whatever. The idea that they actually take that idea and reverse it makes me think, wow, what a shame James Cameron didn't actually do that with Avatar as well, I would assume. I assume that's long gone now. I'm so used to the boring cliche tropes and that Avatar is a boring, super successful, popular movie that nobody can quote, other than that the character's name's Jake, and we've learnt that the long way around by trying to remember anything about this movie, that I kind of forgot there is room to play with that premise more, and an animal villain pretending to be the politician who's about to do a rally. Fantastic stuff. This then turns into not just killing the one human, but actually committing a genocide on a bunch of humans by using noise disruptive speakers to kill the humans at the human frequency. And they play with it even more in a brilliant way, whereas it all starts falling apart. I love the miscommunication with the crowd where Mabel's like, "I'm sorry, I killed your mother." And everyone's like, "What?" What? Love that kind of humor. As I say, well, I can understand why that joke's not in the trailer, but still, why are the bad jokes in the trailer exclusively? They then really do some great dark humor body horror stuff with the face of the guy coming off of the robot body. It's full on like Five Nights at Freddy's style animatronic madness that rolls around. Just a great destruction, as it then turns into a forest fire where the humans and animals have to work together to save something as part of a bigger problem. It's a nice, standard ending. I was wondering how they were going to do it, and rather than it always being the good guys win or the bad guys win, full overpowered one way or another, the conclusion they do come to in this movie that is nice and a little more nuanced is that we are all part of something bigger. We're all connected in some way, and there needs to be some version of events where you work together through it. It's not that Mabel wins and they don't build the road over that land, it's that they find some solution together where they reroute it to not be on that land, and the land becomes a natural reserve instead. It's nice. Loop it back to being able to sit down and breathe it all in like your grandma made you, but now you do it with a beaver you can't communicate to except exclusively through emojis for that joke again. And you've got a solid, great Pixar movie. I struggle to call it a Pixar classic because it doesn't hit the emotional twangs as hard as I think it could. They could have done more exploration of the grieving or the slower moments that are meant to be there. I feel like they weren't as emotionally enriching as it could have been. It's quite soft and standard, but maybe a simple movie that's great is pretty good too. It runs through the cliches in the best definitive version of those cliches. It's a good movie, and one I think will become a guilty pleasure for a lot of people. A real fan favorite, or a nice movie people really like, and a comfort movie. That's what I'm thinking, that people can come up to a lot. Particularly when it comes to Disney Plus, so people don't have to go for the expensive theatrical experience. I would 100% recommend this movie. It is a Pixar win that we haven't seen in a long time, bar the latest sequel. I watched Pixar's Hoppers, so you didn't have to, and thankfully I can say I was wrong about it too. Far better than I expected, and that is a fantastic thing to hear. For now though, I'd best finally end it off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this review. Do tell us your thoughts on Pixar's Hoppers. You think I was still being too harsh? Would you rather call it a Pixar classic already? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and more. It's great to hear about a good movie for once. But anyway, otherwise, I shall see you all in a little bit. Cheerio!